We got breaking news out of the NFL. Mike Williams is heading back to L.A., signing a one-year, $6 million deal with the Chargers. That's according to the NFL Network. Williams spent the first 7 years of his career with the Bolts before splitting last season with the Jets and Steelers. A relatively disappointing 2024 for Williams. 21 catches, 298 yards, and a touchdown over an 18-game stretch. He will now reunite with Justin Herbert, who he had plenty of success with before with the Chargers. And more from the NFL. Mac Jones has agreed to a 2-year, $7 million deal with the 49ers to serve as Brock Purdy's backup after spending last season in Jacksonville. Jones ended up starting 7 games for the Jags last season. Trevor Lawrence was recovering from a shoulder injury and a concussion. New deal with San Francisco includes $5 million guaranteed. It can reach a maximum value of $11.5 million with incentives. Marcus Lawrence leaving Dallas for a new 3-year, $42 million deal with the Seattle Seahawks. $18 million guaranteed for the 32-year-old who played just 4 games last season thanks to a foot injury. Saints defensive end Cam Jordan has announced that he'll be returning for his 15th season in New Orleans. The 8-time Pro Bowler spent his entire career in the Big Easy. He'll be turning 36 in July, ranking second in franchise history in sacks, which is 1.5 behind the all-time leader, Ricky Jackson. Jordan has not missed a game in either of the past 2 seasons, tallying 6 sacks over that stretch. Head coach Sean Payton thinks he's got his offensive joker in the form of 30-year-old tight end Evan Ingram. Ingram signing a 2-year deal worth $16.5 million guaranteed with the Denver Broncos Wednesday. Ingram had a career year in 23 before injuries limited him to just 8 games in 2024 with the Jaguars. 2021 NFL Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP Cooper Kupp has been released by the LA Rams after they couldn't find a trade partner for the 31-year-old receiver. Rams signed Devontae Adams to a 2-year deal back on Sunday. Kupp still owed $5 million in guaranteed salary from the Rams in 2025, even though he'll be playing elsewhere. And Aaron Rodgers is a free agent. New York Jets officially releasing the 4-time NFL MVP on Wednesday. Rodgers spent 2 seasons with the Jets, the first mostly rehabbing a torn Achilles. This past season, not great. And now it's a matter of what comes next for one of the greatest QBs of all time. And apparently what comes now for Aaron Rodgers is taking a nice stroll along the Malibu beach. Russ Thaler here inside the studios talking NFL. And Ryan, we are talking about Aaron Rodgers because, well, he's got to go somewhere or he's going to retire. Most people seem to think he's going to go somewhere. What team needs Aaron Rodgers the most?
Let's assume this is my bingo card. You know what's not on it? Aaron Rodgers huddled in a blanket, walking on a beach, wearing old school earphones. But here we are, and this is the guy that we have to talk about after the official start of free agency. He somehow, as a 41-year-old, remains the story. But he remains the story because 2 teams in particular, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Giants, need a quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers, as he looks to be on the beach in his fancy little bathing suit there, is holding them hostage in the sense that until he makes a decision, those teams can't move forward with what they're going to do. Russ Wilson has visited the Browns. He is also going to visit the Giants. In the meantime, the Steelers would like to get Aaron Rodgers in the building because they lost Justin Fields to the Jets. So it's wait-and-see mode. You have to determine what Aaron Rodgers is going to do, and then you will decide as the Pittsburgh Steelers what's the next move.
Does Russell Wilson, who's obviously taking these meetings with teams now, does he have to wait for Aaron Rodgers, or is there a team maybe that might decide, you know what, we can't wait on Aaron anymore, we'll just go with Russ? What's the best stop for him?
Yeah, the Steelers had the opportunity to sign Russ Wilson before this all started, free agency. They also wanted Justin Fields. He signed with the Jets, and now they've maybe perhaps overplayed their hand. I think they would rather have Aaron Rodgers. He's probably the better short-term answer. We saw what Russ did last year. Hot start, cold finish. They finished 0-5 and lost in the playoffs yet again. And I think Aaron Rodgers, they feel like, gives them the best chance in the near term. Although, again, they wanted Justin Fields, didn't want to pay him what he was worth. They just traded for DK Metcalf, so they have to find a quarterback capable of pushing the ball down the field with Metcalf and George Pickens. And I'll just say this, Russ. For as bad as Aaron Rodgers was in the 2 years he was in New York, He got better the last 5 or 6 games of the season after he seemed a little more healed from that Achilles injury. So perhaps that's what the Steelers are banking on.
Look, the Giants are a team that's been named now a few times with Russ or with Aaron Rodgers. They also have a top 3 draft pick at this point.
Yep.
So if the Giants decide to go with one of those veteran quarterbacks, maybe for a 1-year deal or a 2-year deal, how does that affect not only the Giants draft, but everyone else at the top?
Yeah, I think the Tennessee Titans are still going to be locked into Cam Ward at first overall. Then after that, the draft sort of starts, as we like to say. But in terms of what the Giants do, let's say they go out and get a Russ Wilson. And you see here some possible candidates to come in and be the 3rd overall pick that's not a quarterback. Travis Hunter would be a layup. He can play on both sides of the ball. Abdul Carter is an absolute machine as an edge rusher. Only did that for 1 season at Penn State after moving from off-ball linebacker. Something else you could think about, Russ, you could trade down if you're the Giants, stockpile some picks, let another team trade up if they want to get a quarterback or another skill position player, and maybe the top of the 2nd round where you pick again, or maybe you trade back into the back end of the 1st round, and maybe you target a quarterback there, whether Shedeur Sanders slips. And I've talked to some sources that think Shedeur Sanders could be in for a Will Levis-type roller coaster ride come draft day. Potential top 5 pick that finds his way to the end of the 1st round or top of the 2nd. Or maybe even the flavor of the month, Jackson Dart, finds his way to one of these teams. And the Giants would be a popular landing spot, either trading back into the 1st or early with that 2nd round pick.
Look, Cooper Kupp is now a free agent. He's been let go by the LA Rams. They do still owe him $5 million for next season, which should help actually when he wants to sign with another team, I would think. But what's the best landing spot, and what team could use him the most?
There are a lot of teams that actually could use him. He could stay in LA with the Chargers if he wanted to, not have to sell his house. They need some help there. But I'm going to go with the sentimental favorite, the Dallas Cowboys. I learned today, fun fact, that his dad was the backup to the backup for Troy Aikman. He and Steve Berline. His grandfather has ties to the Cowboys. He took the off-traveled route of tight end to offensive guard. You don't see that every day.
That was in the 60s.
Go back to the 60s and see that. You see it right there in the graphic. And they need help, most importantly. They have CeeDee Lamb, of course, who plays a lot in the slot, but this would allow CeeDee Lamb to be a lot more versatile in terms of how they use him alignment-wise. Cooper can man the slot. Look, he has never been a burner. He ran a 4.6 coming out. He plays faster than that, even though he's in his 30s and battled injuries now. But it'd be a huge get for CeeDee Lamb, be a huge get for Dak Prescott in that offense.
All right, Ryan Wilson, not only in CBS Sports NFL analyst, also our draft guru as well. So this man is competing for the starting job in Indianapolis. All right, we're doing a little NFL free agency superlatives on a Wednesday with Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports. And not just today. We'll take it all the way back to the opening of free agency, all right? We're going to start with the biggest surprise. What was the biggest surprise so far to you?
This is like old school high school yearbook. The biggest, best hair. That would be you.
Not neither of us.
I'm going to go with Geno Smith. And I was surprised when that news came down. I think it was last Friday. It feels like it was 3 years ago. It's been so long. He goes to a team in Las Vegas that's feels like they're turning the corner. They have Pete Carroll as their new head coach. Chip Kelly is going to be the OC, and they've certainly upgraded the quarterback position, which was their biggest need coming in to the offseason. Last year, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew were not the answer. 12 quarterbacks, 6 quarterbacks were taken in the top 12 picks a year ago, so they were just on the outside looking in. They picked 13th, got Brock Bowers, home run hit. Now you have the quarterback in Geno Smith, and you might say, hey, Geno threw 15 interceptions last year. That Seahawks offensive line was in a bad way. This Vegas line is going to be a little bit better, and I think he's going to have an opportunity to allow this team to compete in that incredibly tough AFC West.
Of course, surprise is one thing, but teams are looking to make an impact, to improve in a big way in the offseason. Who's made the most impactful moves for their team so far?
Bears GM Ryan Poles has done a great job of surrounding Caleb Williams with big guys who can protect him, because that was the thing last year we saw for the first 2/3 of the season, in that Caleb was playing a lot of hero ball that we saw at USC, and also the offensive line was in shambles at times. The edge rushers, the bookends, right tackle and left tackle, Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones, were good when they were healthy, but the interior was a huge point of contention, and they went out and got Drew Dalvin in the center. They traded for Jonah Jackson, and they also traded for Joe Tooney, who had to kick out at left tackle in an emergency situation for the Chiefs. So I think they are doing all the right things ahead of the draft to protect Caleb Williams. The last month of the season, Caleb finally looked a little comfortable. They have a new OC in there. They have a new head coach in Ben Johnson, who we know what he's going to bring to the party offensively. And I think now that the interior of that offensive line is bolstered, expect Caleb Williams to take the step forward.
All right, look, whether it's teams getting desperate who need to make a leap or just people talking themselves into maybe a free agent, we are going to look back on some of these free agents and say, man, that guy got way overpaid, or they'll outplay their deal. But who do you think was the biggest overpay so far?
I'm going to say Sam Darnold, even though he's only averaging, quote-unquote, $33 million a year, which is mediocre at best when you stack him against the best paid, the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. But he's getting that payday off of one fantastic season and an offense that was tailor-made for him to have success. Now he goes to a team where, as I just mentioned, the offensive line has had some concerns. They're going to have to try to bolster the interior of that offensive line, not yet through free agency in Seattle, but maybe through the draft. We'll see what happens. There were offensive line issues due to injury in Minnesota, but Kevin O'Connell and all those playmakers certainly made life easier for Sam Darnold. No DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to recreate in Seattle what we saw and what could end up being a one-year wonder in Minnesota a year ago. So an overpay in the sense that Sam Darnold maybe hasn't earned it over the course of his career, but I understand why the Seahawks did it, because they just moved on from Geno.
Look, none of these moves happen in a vacuum, right? One player goes to one team, that opens up a spot on a different team, and then, and this is something you work on every day, the draft is coming up too.
Yeah.
So what move in free agency so far do you think is kind of the biggest domino effect when it comes to the draft?
Yeah, I said last night that one of the biggest winners through the first 2 days of free agency were the New England Patriots, because they have done a lot of good things, primarily on defense, but they got some help on offense from Drake May as well in terms of Morgan Moses and Mac Hollins. But I love the idea of them signing Carlton Davis, the other corner, to pair opposite their former first-round pick, Christian Gonzalez. And I say that, Russ, because this means at 4, if Travis Hunter is there, you don't have to worry about him playing cornerback. You put him as a wide receiver. He's a big play wide receiver. He'll be the number one wide receiver on day one just because he is so incredibly productive. And you give Drake May a much-needed target that he lacked his rookie season in New England.
All right, last thing, because we're not done yet. Free agency is still going on. The draft's coming up. What's the biggest chip still to fall? What's the next big thing?
He's in a hut somewhere, sitting in total darkness maybe. Aaron Rodgers, we got to figure out what his plans are. We talked earlier tonight about Russ Wilson visiting the Browns, probably going to visit the Giants, and those two quarterbacks are probably going to land in one of those two places. I think the first domino has to be Aaron Rodgers, and that will determine what happens with Russ Wilson. A couple other big-name wide receivers are still out there. Steph Diggs is still available coming off the ACL injury. Amari Cooper, who never quite put it together when he was traded to the Bills last fall. But I think Aaron Rodgers, you know, it's all in his hands. He has to decide what he wants to do, and I think he probably likes the attention. The Steelers are between a rock and a hard place. Less so for the Giants because they picked near the top of the draft. So he can determine the Steelers' fate both in the near term and what their quarterback plans are going to have to be should he decide he doesn't want to go to Pittsburgh. And Russ, your guess is as good as mine when we find out what Aaron Rodgers' plans are.
Before we sign off here, is there like a cutoff date where Aaron Rodgers is going to have to make a move, or teams are going to have to decide without him making a decision?
Well, I mean, the speculation is that Kirk Cousins could wait until after the draft to decide his landing spot to see how it shakes out with the other teams that need quarterbacks. And I suppose Aaron Rodgers could do the same thing. He would be a much more valuable commodity right now than Kirk Cousins. He's a year further removed, I believe, or maybe the same time frame actually in the Achilles. So they got to sort that out. But he can wait as long as he wants because he is Aaron Rodgers.
If Aaron Rodgers thought that people didn't like him very much right now, wait till after the draft and he hasn't picked the team yet. My goodness. Ryan, thanks so much, man. Much appreciated. Here's a look at the updated odds to win the Super Bowl right now. The defending champs have the shortest odds with the Ravens